This is a test. Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. How is the sound out there? Just making sure the sound out there is good. Testing to see if the sound out there is good. Do you hear the sound? Bear with us for one more minute, please. How is the sound out there, Alicia? It sounds good? Are we ready to start? Okay, 1 second. Okay, we're good? Ready to start, okay. Well, again, for those of you that are here earlier, thank you again for sticking around. For those of you that just arrived, thank you so much for coming, and thank you for being so patient. We knew that having Francesca and Max Blumenthal here on the same evening would be a big deal for a lot of people. We didn't anticipate it to be such a big deal, but we appreciate you all being here. So thank you very much. It's a real testament to the need for this types of gatherings. I think gatherings that are really important when you have people connecting with one another. This is exactly why Busboys and Poets was created. It was created to create community. And you can't create community just online. It has to be a human interaction. And this is what this is about. Humanity coming together, intersecting with each other, breaking bread together, and planning and scheming the next revolution. So thank you all for being part of it. I want to make the announcement we made earlier. There's lots of events that are happening. Please visit our website, busboysandpoets.com, to see other events. We are happy to be a place, a safe place for people to come here and talk about very, very important and sensitive conversations oftentimes, in a place where you're around smart people who can actually have a conversation with you and be able to advance the dialogue forward as we all want to see a better world. We are planning on some events that are coming up, and for those of you that may have been to some of our events, we are planning one huge event that will take place around the time of the inauguration. That will be on January the 18th. The inauguration takes place on January the 20th. This year it will take place on Martin Luther King Day. And we had in the past planned inaugural balls. And these are gatherings. They're not really just celebrations for who gets elected, because we don't know who's going to get elected, and we have many, many different issues with those that we sometimes elect. This is really about bringing together the peace and justice movement to be able to celebrate, to be able to energize, to be able to get together, and to be able to go forward for the next whatever number of years. As you know, most of what happens, all the change that happens, doesn't happen at the ballot box. It happens before and after. That's the work that needs to happen. Oftentimes we forget that that's the most important work. So regardless of who's at the head, who's the president, we have to continue to fight for justice, fight for peace, and fight for not just here, but also all over the world. So this year, our peace ball is the peace ball for justice and liberation, and we already have it online. We will it'll take place at the African American Museum for History and Culture. We will have the entire museum that night. You can see all the exhibits if you haven't been there. It's definitely worth your time to be there and be able to experience that museum. It will be from 7 p.m. until midnight on January the 18th, a Saturday. And we have some really amazing people that will be there who will share this evening with you and be able to inspire you so that you can be energized and move forward for the next whatever number of years. We have Angela Davis, we have Alice Walker, we have Rashida Tlaib, we have Abraham Kendi, we have Amy Goodman, we have Medea Benjamin. We have so many really exciting people that will be part of this. Sonia Sanchez, Eve Ensler, the list goes on and on and on. All these people have confirmed, and we hope to have many more, and we'll keep it going as we move forward. So please visit our website. I would suggest you buy a ticket as soon as you can, because the last time we sold out, we had over 4,000 people that came to this incredible event. Of course, there's music and there's food and there's open bar and all of that goes with it. But the real purpose of it is to bring people together to celebrate the successes and move forward. So, on with this evening's program. We had a wonderful event earlier. We showed the film Atrocity, Inc., which was made by Max Blumenthal, that speaks about what happened on October the 7th and all the narrative around it, and dispelling those narratives. We have to continue to dispel the narrative that continues to come forward to us. We have to continue to speak truth to power, no matter how costly sometimes it has to be. So, for this evening, we want to begin the evening with an acknowledgement of the space we're standing in. I want to be able to bring up forward a Piscataway woman who will be able to do a small prayer and celebration for us as we stand here on this land. I want to introduce her properly. Hope is a Piscataway woman, and she belongs to the Deer Clan. Her native name is Machesa, which means fire starter or spark of a flame. Educator and social racial justice activist, she grew up learning the traditional values of Piscataway. She has learned to incorporate the values and culture of other indigenous nations worldwide in her activism. Hope's primary mission is to preserve the traditions of all indigenous peoples and expand how they are perceived today. Most importantly, she was to protect indigenous peoples and women's rights for present and emerging generations. Hope has currently and previously served on the board of directors of various indigenous nonprofits and associations. Hope is a senior at a Georgetown University, and she is honored to give tonight's blessing. So please welcome Hope. In front of you, if you like. Let me stand on that side. Okay. I apologize.
I can just, and then way ho, way ho, way ho, way ho, way ho, way ho. Way ho, way ho, way ho, way ho. Gaia watching it, oh Gaia watching it. Gaia watching it, oh Gaia watching it. Gaia watching it. Way ho, oh ho, oh ho. Gaia watching it, oh Gaia watching it. Gaia watching it, oh Gaia watching it. Gaia watching it. Way oh Gaia watching it, oh Gaia watching it. Way ho, oh ho, oh ho. Gaia watching it, oh Gaia watching it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sorry. It is an honor to be here on the ancestral land of my ancestors to give this welcome and blessing to everyone present. Thank you so much for allowing me to do this. And for time, this is a blessing from my elder, Rico Newman. He's a Piscataway elder and the leader of the Choptico Band of Piscataway Indians. And this is the blessing that he normally gives. And as someone who is an emerging elder, he gave me this blessing to start to give in his place. Good evening, Wilikichku. It is a native tradition to begin sessions where the exchange of ideas is to occur and where respect and acceptance are intended and needed. To that end, we address that outcome by noting the gifts we receive from what we call the four directions. From the South, where the season of growth and renewal brings up those things from the earth that makes us stand up well. I ask that that gift be with us, that no one has untoward issues that may impact their health and distract them from the efforts at hand. From the West, where the clouds bring us the waters that nourish the earth, fill our waterways, providing life to those of the water. I ask the waters that flow in all of us to keep our throats moist, that your words flow freely and true when you speak, and that your eyes stay clear to see what takes place, and your ears stay unstopped to hear what is truly said. From the North, may the cool winds that keeps our minds clear and disperse the mind creatures that twist meaning, true purposes, and bring discord and dissension. And finally, from the East, where the sun brings us the light of day to shine in our eyes, to avoid the pitfalls and obstacles placed in our path to impede progress. For those and the many blessings we receive without asking, we give sincere thanks, and may you all stand up well. And as a tradition, can you hold this for a second? As a tradition, we usually give visitors gifts, and I have a gift for you tonight that I made this afternoon, if you want to stand up.
Sorry. Can you hold that for you?
Yeah. I made a pouch for you.
Thank you.
So just something for you to carry around, little things. And this, and sometimes wampum, people say, oh, it's money. No, it's a symbol or philosophy of life and of spirituality. And this is a quahog shell, and the wampum is here, and we make beads and different trinkets. And I usually make necklaces, so I made one and with hair bone and with crow beads that had the Palestinian colors for you. You can take it off and cut it. And I have a shell for Dr. Hashemi, too. And thank you for, shukran, thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you. Yep, he's going to help you. Thank you so much, Hope. Thank you. What a beautiful ceremony. You're right, Francesca. Yeah. Yeah. All right, I'm going to introduce Dr. Hashemi, and then he will introduce Francesca. We'll start the conversation, and then we'll do a short Q&A afterwards. And if you'd like to stick around after that and have a little bit of an exchange with Francesca and with Nader, please do so. So Dr. Hashemi, it's such a pleasure to have you again. These have been really beautiful events that you've been hosting here. The Gaza series has been quite incredible, so we really appreciate you. And of course, much, much needed in these very difficult times. He is the director of the Al-Walid Center for Muslim-Christian Understanding and associate professor of Middle East and Islamic politics at the Edmund A. Walsh School of Foreign Service at Georgetown University. He's an author, an academic, and a great interviewer. So welcome to Busboys and Poets.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you to the team at Busboys and Poets. In an age when events related to the question of Palestine are canceled or shut down, it's great to know that we have this community space here in Washington, D.C., and where events such as this can't be shut down. So thank you, Andy and Lori and everyone at Busboys and Poets. Given the applause that began this event and the lineup that I saw outside, tonight's speaker really doesn't need a big introduction. So it's an honor to present to all of you Francesca Albanese. Her official title is she's the Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in the Palestinian territories occupied by Israel since 1967. She was appointed in 2022 to a 3-year term by the UN Human Rights Council, and she's the first woman to hold this position. Francesca. How's that? Francesca has an affiliation with one of our centers at Georgetown University. She's published widely on the issue of international human rights law. Specifically, she's an expert on the Palestinian refugees in international law, which is actually the title of her very important book that's outside on sale tonight. She's worked at the United Nations for a very long time as a human rights expert. But I think more importantly, during this moment of despair, this moment of darkness, this moment of genocide, those of us who care for human rights, those of us who care about international law, those of us who care about the rights of the Palestinian people could not have asked for a better advocate of those rights than Francesca Albanese. So it's deeply appreciated, Francesca. So I want to leave a lot of time for questions and answers because I know a lot of people have come from long distances to ask you a question. But let me get the evening started tonight by, I guess, asking you about the release of your report today called Genocide as Colonial Erasure, just released today. Could you give us a summary of that report and perhaps say how it compares to your earlier report this year, Anatomy of Genocide in Gaza?
Absolutely. First of all, thank you very much for Andy for having us here. It's nice to be back. I had never tried the emotion of being on this side of on this side of the room. But this place was a safe haven for me during the years I spent in Washington, D.C. As we are going to discuss my report, which just came out today, and it's titled, yeah, is it okay? Can you hear me? Good. It's titled Colonial Erasure. I allow you to give me 1 minute to stay here in this room, in this country, because I would like us to reflect on what hope brought to us tonight. And I feel very weird. I would feel very weird if I didn't say what I'm going to say. I don't want the Palestinians in 50 years to have to be welcomed and thanked to give a speech on their land as if they were guests recognized all of a sudden. If you stand for Palestine, please take a moment to realize that right now you stand on the ancestral land of the Piscataway and Nacachte people. There are still 4,000 Native Americans from these communities, genocide survivors, because this country is birthed from a genocide which has not been acknowledged. And we should not start any discussion without recognizing the legacy of the past. Because the problem that we have, especially, I mean, I look at this room, and sorry to say, I mean, it's white folks. So you belong to me. You belong to, okay, not you. You're clearly from Asia, but look around, you are pretty much a minority here. You and my Puerto Rican friend, Victor. I'm saying the majority in this room are probably the product of where I come from, the continent from which colonialism and its most insidious creator, settler colonialism, sprouted and subjugated natives around the world. The fact that we have removed this from our learning, from our understanding of international relations, it's what I called colonial amnesia. We need to undo that. And after visiting Australia last year, and after seeing the enduring plight of the Aboriginal Australians who have been genocided, and still they've survived, and they still struggle for the recognition of their self-determination, I say, I cannot speak on the rights of the Palestinians if I'm whatever, it's the offspring of a settler colonial system without acknowledging the original custodians of the original stewards of the land. So thank you so much, Hope, for welcoming me. It's been the most beautiful welcome I've ever received.
Let me just...
Colonial erosion in Palestine. I didn't forget your question.
Before you go on to that question, I had a question here that's related to what you just said. Because earlier today at Georgetown University, you made a connection between the colonial erasure of indigenous populations here in North America and what's happening in Gaza today. If there was a greater understanding, you said, of the history of genocide in this part of the world, perhaps there would be greater understanding today in North America that would stop the genocide or be at least an obstacle to the policies of the United States that's supporting a genocide. Could you draw those connections and elaborate more, since we're talking about this topic right now?
Yeah. First of all, let me tell a little bit about the report that just came out today, which walks very much on the heels of my previous report. So this year, over the last 12 months, I've reluctantly become the chronicler of a genocide. And I didn't want to. I'm not a genocide scholar. I had to learn. I had to go back to the books. And the best way to learn what genocide is to look at what the person who coined the term genocide had in mind. He was a Jewish scholar, a Holocaust survivor, Raphael Lemkin, who coined the term genocide. And of course, he thought that what happened at the culmination, at the end of centuries of persecution of the Jewish people in Europe, which culminated with the Holocaust. He knew that the Jewish people in Europe had been the victims of a Holocaust, of a genocide, what he called a genocide, but he also knew that it was nothing new, because millions of people had been victims of genocide in Latin America, in Africa, in Southeast Asia, at the hand of settler colonial powers. So why we Europeans have very clear in mind right now, after decades, because soon after the Holocaust, there was no sense of guilt toward the Jewish people. And still today, I think that we struggle to really understand what we, Europeans and Western people, have done to the Jewish people, because we tend to think of the Holocaust like the concentration camps. Hell no, because before, I mean, how did we get to the concentration camps? Because we had normalized the brutalization of the Jewish people. We had the right to kick them out of medical professions, legal professions, from universities. It was normal. They were subhuman, right? So this is why it was normal to put them in concentration camps. But dehumanization, it starts genocide, and Raphael Lemkin understood it. And this is why, as I started to unpack what is genocide, the first thing I looked at is what is dehumanization. And I'm glad, I mean, there is here in the room with us tonight the brother of someone from whom I've learned a lot, Miko Peled. His sister, Nurit Peled, has written a lot about the dehumanization of the Palestinians in the Israeli system, especially the education system, which has been a vehicle for a political doctrine of hatred. The Palestinians, Nurit tells us, has been portrayed as Nazis. The Palestinians have been blamed for the Holocaust. So, and of all the things that the Palestinians might have done or might do, I mean, one thing they were not responsible, have not been responsible for is the Holocaust. Do we agree? And so this thing of blaming them and condemning them as savages, subhumans, and it's something that has been planted for years in the soul of people who were heavily traumatized, who were carrying themselves an intergenerational trauma, like the Jewish people, many of whom ended up in Palestine. We shall not forget, I do not judge any Jewish people who 8 years ago went to Palestine, having no other place for survival. It was, back then it was an existential, really an existential fight. They were part of a colonial project, but it was an existential fight. Today, can we think today? Can we look at the past and understand that whatever was salvation for the Jewish people, victims of the Holocaust in Europe, imposed a huge price on the Palestinians? Can we do that? The answer is no. And even today, as the Palestinians have been victimized, the object of humiliation and indignity, extrajudicial killing, arbitrary arrest and detentions for decades. This has been sort of ignored. And after the 7th of October, a new level of rage was directed at the Palestinians. The 7th of October is a tragic date for the Israelis. But this is what also triggered the opportunity for Israel to complete and channel the project of what I call colonial erasure. Israel sees the opportunity to complete that plan of realizing Jewish sovereignty only in the land of Palestine, because this has been an obsession of many in Israel since the very project of the founding fathers of Israel. You see, if you look at what the founding fathers of Israel wrote up to 50, 60 years ago, they openly talked about colonization. And why so? Colonization of Palestine. They used to say, let us colonize Palestine as the Brits have colonized India, as the French have colonized Algeria. Because up to 70 years ago, colonialism was totally acceptable. Today it's not, and so the narrative has changed. But it is about colonial erasure. It is about uprooting a people from a land, and a land for indigenous people. And I'm sure indigenous people understand what I'm saying, because I've learned, this is not my thought, I've learned it from indigenous scholars. The land for indigenous people is not the place where they live, the apartment where they rent, is who they are. And because this is who they are, the Palestinians, doesn't matter how many times you destroy their homes, they will live in the rubble, under the rubble, they will live in caves, and they will not leave because the land is who they are. And what has been going on after October 7, the destruction of Gaza, is a means to an end, is a way to make sure that the Palestinians have no place to return to, no means to live, to resist, to survive in the place that I've called home, or home as a refuge. And unfortunately, as we speak, this is ongoing.
I don't want to ignore what's happening at this precise moment in northern Gaza. Since October the 6th, there's been an attempt to depopulate the 400,000 Palestinians who are left behind. Can you give us an update on exactly what's happening in northern Gaza? What do we need to know?
I'm not sure I can give you an update because no one knows. We have these sparkles of light in the darkness that has wrapped or enveloped the northern Gaza. So just to put things in context, on the 14th of October, I wrote that I was very worried about what Israel was doing, because the kind of words they were using, Amalek is a term that has recurred a lot throughout this genocide. And it's a term that carries an incredible meaning. It's destructive. It's in the Bible. One wonders. However, read the Bible. I don't read the Bible. However, if you read the Bible, you'd be shocked, because it's incredible that it's such a exterminatory language in a religious text. However, it was the product of the time when it was written. However, it says, go and destroy the Amalek, the mother, the suckling, meaning the baby, the camel and the donkey, and everything else. It's pretty much a genocidal call. And now, this term, I argue in my last report, has been like, it's not uncommon in genocides to have specific language that resonates with the local community, but this has been like a trigger in the Israeli society, because Amalek has a meaning in that society, like chop the tall trees was in Rwanda, and there were similar words used in former Yugoslavia and probably in other genocides. And the thing is, on the 14th of October, after Israel ordered the forced displacement of 1.1 million people from northern Gaza, they were ordered to move from north to south. Immediately, other human rights organizations said, this is unlawful. You cannot forcibly order mass evacuation of over 1 million people, which included 22 hospitals who were sheltering patients and IDPs, people who had already left their homes, because meanwhile, Gaza had been bombed for 7 days already. And Israel dropped leaflets saying, if you don't leave in 24 hours, you will be bombed because you are a terrorist accomplice. This is unlawful. This is not what international law prescribes for cases where evacuations are ordered. There should be protection for the people who are evacuated, and the case of necessity determining the evacuation. And I said, under the fog of war, it has happened in 1947, it has happened in 1967, Israel forcibly displaced masses of Palestinians, and this is what the Nakba has been for the Palestinians, and this is a way to take the land of the Palestinians, because there is forced displacement followed by mass destruction of the civilian infrastructure so that the Palestinians have no place to return to. And this was prescient, because 1 year later, of that 1.1 million people, 400,000 have remained in northern Gaza under desperate circumstances, which we do not know much about because very little has entered northern West Bank and much has been destroyed, as I had predicted, in fact. And as of beginning of October, Israel has determined that all these 400,000 have to go, and because they don't move, the Titan siege had been further tightened, and not only there is no water, no food, nothing, the bombing has accelerated, and so the rounding up of men, the separation of male from females, and the taking of males, extrajudicial killings, they're really going home by home and killing people in Gaza or kidnapping people from Gaza. It's unspeakable, but so unspeakable is the fact that our community, our society has not enough capacity to block it, to react. And in fact, countries like the US or Germany and other countries in Europe are even strengthening the support to Israel. And the call, this is self-defense, according to some, but this self-defense is the license to kill and to destroy. So this is pretty appalling.
Yeah. I want to leave a lot of time for the audience to ask questions, but let me ask you a question that I think is on the minds of many people, given where we are tonight in the United States and that there's an election coming up. Which candidate is worse for the Palestinians? Harris or Trump? People have to make a decision. And you can say that you're not an American, so you can say what you want. I hope.
I am an American child. I'm not going to compromise their view. No, I'm joking. I don't know. Frankly, I don't. Sorry, as someone from outside, I understand that one is worse than the other from an American perspective. But as someone like me who looks at American politics through their foreign politics, I don't see much difference. So they're both bad. Sorry.
Okay, I think we have a microphone where we can circulate so we can get...
Actually, you have the microphone, we can circulate. I'm going to give you the other microphone, and she'll keep that one. Yep. All right, I'm going to go out there first, in all fairness to the people that have been standing outside, and see if anybody wants to ask a question from there first.
Ask him to speak loud.
And while you bring the microphone, probably I should elaborate why they are both bad, because both of them ignore something quite basic. In the US, you have a lot of talking about rules-based order, which is nonsense. It doesn't exist. Which rules are we talking about? What we have at the international level, and the US has been critical in shaping it until 20 years ago, is an international law-based system made of universal rules that apply to everyone equally. And while this has been, let's be honest, mostly aspirational rather than real, in the sense it has been mostly real for us in the global north, while the people in the global south have continued to experience wars and conflicts until very recent colonialism, and still. A society like today, which blatantly violates international law, and puts aside and sidelines the the multilateral system, is a society that is ready to embrace lawlessness, which puts aside the force of the law, like being there to protect everyone, and instead places at the center the law of force. This is what is ahead of us. And again, human rights seems useless to most of us anymore.
All right, I have the microphone. I'm going to be handing it to somebody. You don't see them, but he's tall, dark, and handsome, and so I'm going to hand him the microphone. He's going to ask you a question.
I'm far from handsome, but he is.
Oh, Oh, hi.
So I say this as somebody who works for the Harris campaign indirectly. I've been to both Milwaukee and Detroit, and both populations, though statistically not scientifically exact, just going off of anecdotal what we've all seen, no one is voting for her. So when the question is asked, who is worse, there's only one person committing an act of genocide right now, and that's the Harris campaign. So though it's unpopular to say that you won't support Harris, it doesn't mean that you'll support Trump. I can honestly say I'd vote for Jill Stein. The Harris campaign, and I've spoken with Max and Anya before, they're directly, fully in knowledge of what's happening right now on the ground in Gaza. I spent the better part of a decade in the U.S. Air Force Special Operations Command within the 125th STS. My unit trained the Sayeret Maktal, as Miko Peled probably knows. Those are the ground components that call in airstrikes. The United States is flying UAVs directly over Gaza on a 24/7 basis. They leave from Creech Air Force Base, they get handed over in Djibouti, and pilots and connexes record 24/7 every single bit of what happens in the Gaza Strip. The camera systems on the UAVs are so intact that they can see displacement of rubble of 5 feet increments, which means that if rubble is displaced within those 5 feet, it flags in a system, which is why you see the utter destruction of Gaza as you see it now. You don't lay waste to an area like that by accident. So it's not indiscriminate bombing, it's far worse. It's purposeful. So when you're making your case for genocide, include that. Because all of the targeting data, the United States holds in warehouse on servers. The Israelis hold in warehouse on servers. In order to call an airstrike, it takes 3 components: the person on the ground, the sensor operator, the pilot, and usually the legal officer. And they all must agree. And all that information is warehoused. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to ask you if you're going to use the microphone, so please use it like you're singing and speak loud so everybody can hear you. We have one more question on this side.
Thank you. I'm not sure if you can see me. My question is related more about the region. The war started in Gaza. Do you think it's going to expand to Iran? It looks like the Middle East is in the making, and the idea is to create smaller states more favorable to the survival of Israel. And it seems like the recent sending of American troops, American boots on the ground, is preparation for an attack to Iran, which is going to take the whole region into a bigger mess.
Will the war expand to Iran?
The question of Iran.
Yeah.
Do you have any comments about Iran,
One and we'll collect them at the end.
Francesca?
Yeah. Look, I don't want to sound like I don't want to deceive anyone, but I tend to talk comfortably about things I know. I feel really embarrassed about sharing my thoughts just for the sake of sharing. And I do not have competence to say whether it will expand to Iran or not. This is my fear. And what I do see is that in March 2024, I wrote something very specific, that Israel was imposing somewhat de facto a new way of violating the laws of war, which, to be frank, is not just Israel doing. I mean, Russia and Ukraine do violate the laws of the war, the Geneva Conventions through and through, and this is something that is happening. The context in Gaza matters. The context in Gaza is that of a 57 years of unlawful occupation, as also recognized by the International Court of Justice in July this year, which the court recognized in all but name as an aggression, which is a crime in and of itself. And it recognized that Israel has no security claims. It cannot claim self-defense and to maintain the occupation. It is to withdraw the occupation, to withdraw the colonies, to end racial segregation and apartheid. And that is it. And make reparations for the Palestinians, what they have endured, and allow the return of the refugees, 1967 displaced. So, and I said, what Israel has been doing in Gaza by expanding ad infinitum what is considered killable and destroyable is becoming a new script. It's creating a world without civilians, and this script, like a few months later, has been applied in Lebanon. You see, everyone is a human shields. Whoever is not a human shields and dies is a collateral damage. And you have seen people in this part of the world or in Europe reacting with, I mean, in awe at how genius exploding the pager was. Because this is horrendous, horrendous. And we shouldn't celebrate any of this. And I suspect that no one in this room does. But we should have all our senses alerted against this script, because the Israelization, Palestinization of the world has already started, and Lebanon is the new frontier. So will it expand to Iran? I don't know. But it's the fact is, my fear is that there might not be enough opposition to this script, because many countries can, in fact, be enticed by this way of using technology to get rid of unwanted political opponents. And this is something that is going to bring us back decades in terms of enjoyment of fundamental freedoms. So it's something that is going to hit us here before thinking of Iran.
All right, we have somebody here.
Thanks. Hi. So I'm just gonna quickly introduce myself so you can get my background, so you can get my question. So I'm Nader. I'm from Bosnia. I'm Bosnian genocide survivor. My mom remarried to a Palestinian family. Now I might have my Bosnian Palestinian siblings. And I'm a genocide scholar. So hi, I just have a question. I have a question where Bosnian genocide was not recognized technically until the war kind of ended and UN troops, and actually Eurofor left, UN came in, exhibit everything, and they found the genocide 4 years later. So what is happening now in Gaza is very similar to what was happening in Sarajevo, because it was modern, longest siege in European city. So my question is, what is the next step for Gaza? If UN, which was only held for Bosnians and for me, what is the next step for Palestinians? How can we actually build a case? I know there's a case. I'm very familiar with the technicality, but what can we do, and what can you do as a part of these reports, which are very valuable, especially for me as academic, but what can we do actually? Can we count those deaths? Can UN get actually on the ground? I see the titles constantly every day the UN cannot get, and UN troops cannot get, but please give me some hope. If you cannot, please be honest. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I can give you hope, but I can promise I'll be honest. And in fact, the reason why I wrote another report on genocide, which is a further zooming out of what I had been immersed into up to March 2024, is precisely because, as someone who's not a genocide scholar, realized is one of the main misconceptions about genocide. Genocide is not a higher crime than war crimes and crimes against humanity. It's simply another crime. It's a crime which is characterized by the intent to destroy a people. And so I tried to clarify what is genocidal intent in the context of a state committing genocide in light of what had happened in Bosnia or in Rwanda, and also in light of the fact that the Genocide Convention was written primarily to prevent other genocides. Really, that is the only international law treaty that is the embodiment of the promise never again, because in fact contains obligations to prevent and punish. How do you prevent if you do not recognize what is genocide? And how can you prevent when the sort of practice is that you have criminal at the international level, in order to establish genocide responsibilities, you have two ways. There is criminal responsibilities of individuals that can be investigated and prosecuted either at the ICC level, so the International Criminal Court as of 2004, or at the domestic level. Countries which are parties to the Genocide Convention, meaning this is customary law, so it obliges everyone, are obliged to investigate and prosecute cases of genocide. So both the national courts and the ICC. This is individuals. State responsibility can only be ascertained, investigated by the International Court of Justice. What has happened in the case of Serbia and Bosnia versus Serbia and Croatia versus Serbia? There is not a lot of jurisprudence, in fact. There are two cases, now one pending on Myanmar, and the fourth is about Palestine. But the court, the ICJ, has tended to rely on criminal proceedings. But I wouldn't consider this, of course I respect the findings and the conclusions of the ICJ, but I say two things. Let's look at the context. This is the first settler colonial genocide that is ever litigated, that probably, will ever be litigated before an international tribunal. So we cannot miss the context. We cannot, the judges cannot miss the forest for the trees. And because genocide is a complex, collective, and insidious crime, you cannot look at genocidal intent with a microscope. You need to zoom out, to take a step back and look at the context. And this is why in my report, I say you need to look at the totality of the conduct, in the totality of the land, against the totality of the people. Because this is what, again, is not my invention. We have studied, with my research team, we have studied the jurisprudence of the various tribunals, and this is already there. It just needs to be lined up. And the thing is that if we don't do that, we risk to fail the major obligation of the convention, which is to prevent genocide. How can you prevent genocide if you need to wait until a criminal trial is concluded? So the paradox is that you risk to guarantee, to protect more the rights of the alleged perpetrator of genocide than the rights of the people protected by the Genocide Convention, which makes no sense. And this is why the threshold to establish the responsibility for genocide at the state level cannot be the same as the individual level, especially as in a state like Israel, which is a proclaimed rule of law system. It is a rule of law system. It might not be fully democratic in the sense it doesn't have equality among its citizens. We know that. But at the same time, it has an executive, a judiciary, and a parliament, and checks and balances, which should kick in the moment that there are excesses. Where were these checks and balances? When there was genocidal incitement, on the 26th of January, the International Court of Justice issued the first set of preliminary measures, and so ordered Israel to investigate and prosecute, among others, the incitement to genocide. Did the judiciary do that? No, it didn't. And in fact, there was even a heightened controls and restrictions at the judicial level against both Palestinians with Israeli citizenships and Palestinians, and less recourse to justice, and more repression of Israelis standing in solidarity with the Palestinians. And where were the other ministers? Did they sort of exercise restraint toward what the war cabinets were doing? Not at all. The parliament, where was the Knesset? So this is why I say, if this genocide with an intent which is so ostentatious and for which the evidence is overwhelming because it's been filmed in real time and posted on social media by the willful executioner themselves, this will be the tomb of international law and whatever has come after the 1948 Genocide Convention.
All right, we have somebody here.
Thank you, Francesca, for all of the work that you're doing. It's extraordinary. And here's my question, and it sort of follows up on this question about what can give us hope about the work going on in the International Court of Justice right now. Today, as we know, the South Africans filed their documents for the rest of the case going forward, the substantive part of the case. But I wonder what you think when we talk about the model of South African apartheid in the 1980s, where we had a very similar situation, not in the context of the International Court of Justice being so involved, but the General Assembly of the UN, which routinely would pass resolutions that could not be passed in the Security Council because of the US veto. They would be passed in the General Assembly and immediately denounced as irrelevant because they're not enforceable. But it turned out they were enforceable by social movements around the world who held them up and used them as tools to mobilize against their own governments, to force governments all over Europe, all over Latin America, parts of Asia, most of Africa, to say, we now have this new tool to enforce the opposition to the crime of apartheid. Similarly, now we have that for genocide as well as for apartheid inside Israel, coming from Israel, against Israeli Palestinians who are citizens of Israel, against refugees, and against Palestinians living under occupation. So my question is, as civil society begins to take up that very difficult task, how do we maximize the work of the International Court of Justice, which the initial report, the initial finding was temporary, but it was extraordinary in its findings, both of the decisions of the court, the illegality of the occupation in the finding in July and the finding last January of the interim finding that it is plausible genocide. How do we best, as civil society, use those tools to mobilize to get enough pressure on enough governments that eventually the US caves in, as it did in South Africa, and eventually ends up imposing sanctions? That's the goal. How do we best use those tools?
So I want to acknowledge two things that have been a source of hope for me. On top of the fact that I see Palestinians around the world, it doesn't matter how broken they are, and they're broken. Because I keep on saying, we have to remind ourselves that a people is like a body. You chop one limb and the entire body suffers. And this is how the Palestinians are right now. So first of all, maximum solidarity and compassion to these people who are killed and they're blamed and they're smeared. It's incredible, the violence, the epistemic violence directed at them, as in countries like this one, more than others. It's unacceptable. But against all this, there have been two signals, two elements that have given me hope. And the first is not in order of importance, I want to say, but the first is that justice, international justice, has finally moved. Because this year, finally, the International Criminal Court has been shaken. And again, I don't know what will happen in the coming months because the court is going and has entered a turbulent path. But there were, for the first time, arrest warrants asked for 3 Hamas leaders who have been already exterminated by Israel. But there are still 2 pending arrest warrants for the Prime Minister of Israel and the Minister of Defense. I think that should be, personally, I think there should be many more, especially the architects of the annexation, like Smotrich and the Ben Gvir, who has been at the heart of the heightened violence against Palestinians in the West Bank, which has gone unchecked and often out of sight. But we shall not forget that 700 Palestinians have been killed in the West Bank, and 170 of them are children. So, yeah, there's been increasing sense of alertedness at the international level, especially at the ICJ. There have been 3 proceedings, the South Africa against Israel, which is amazing because this country surviving 300 years of genocide, 300 years of colonialism, the last 50 of which have been recorded in history as apartheid. But apartheid is a structural feature of settler colonialism. And South Africa has given us the term apartheid. But again, apartheid is a structural feature accompanying systems of racial domination. And so it was so symbolic to see South Africa taking Israel to justice. Other countries, European countries, could have done so, and they didn't. So very important. And then there was Nicaragua versus Germany. And the court dismissed none of these cases, and in fact, both are pending. But the most seismic shift has been provoked by the ICJ advisory opinion that was delivered in July this year. Don't be fooled by the name of it's an advisory opinion because it was given not in the context of a litigation, but it's binding because it's based upon non-derogable norms of international law, like the prohibition of annexing land, taking land by force, the prohibition of practicing apartheid or racial discrimination, and the prohibition of violating the right of self-determination. And so the fact that the court reminded all states of their obligation not to assist and aid the unlawful occupation and disengage from that unlawful occupation, it's something that triggers action at every domestic level. So together with other special rapporteurs, I've issued a number of recommendations for member states. But in fact, in relaunching them, together with my colleagues, we've said, it's for you, it's for civil society to look at this. For example, there should be an audit of every kind of relations that member states have with Israel. And from an economic, military, political, strategic point of view. And you will be surprised, but even we tend to blame the West, but there is no country, including in the global South, who has not directly or indirectly related to the surveillance system that Israel has produced, tested on the Palestinians, and then sold abroad. This is incredible, but this is why, as it was said today, there was a student at Georgetown University who said something extremely intelligent. Many countries, including in the global South, are looking at Israel with envy as a model to emulate in order to crush their internal opposition. And this is why it's upon us. It's upon us. And the young people in our societies have understood that. And really praise to the students. I don't know how many students are here. But praise to the students who have risked so much And many of them have already paid a high price. But this is the challenge for us and for all of you, to defend the defenders, not to leave the students or the faculty members alone, and to help, including people in the administration who are breaking the ranks, not to be alone, because I often say, and I know that sounds very cheesy, but it's real. Alone we are frail as wing of butterflies, but it's true. It's a law of physics that if we start flapping our wings all together, we can make a storm, and this is the storm we need right now.
I think we have time. We have time for maybe 3 more questions? 3 more questions.
Thank you, Francesca. As a Palestinian attorney who has studied international law, one thing that we've all seen this year is the failure of international law to stop the ongoing genocide in Gaza, even as it has been live streamed for the world to see, which has not been true of the Nakba in 1948. As somebody who works within the UN system, what role do you see for international law going forward? Or does international law not exist to serve those of us who are not American or European?
Okay, so first of all, as I said, I do come from that part of the world which has believed and teaches its students, apart from a few exceptions, that international law is an instrument to regulate state relations and ensure peace and stability. And then when I was 28, I went to SOAS, the School of Oriental and African Studies, and all of a sudden I was exposed to what is called TWAIL, Third World Approach to International Law. And poof, the bubble was poked. And I got a crisis, because what I wanted to study, international law as this instrument of justice, had in fact been used as an instrument to subjugate and depredate native populations for 500 years and counting. And that 500 years of depredation, legalized through international law, has marked, as Omar Barghouti says, our DNA as Western societies. So this is why I keep on insisting we need to unpack that. Now, not all is lost. And I have to say, there is one part of international law that is a little bit more sane and safer. Human rights. Human rights law is not something that has been given to us. Human rights law is the codification of civil struggle, the struggle against slavery, the struggle against the suppression of minorities. This is where self-determination comes from. It's the struggle for the recognition of equal rights, for women's right to vote and gender rights, gender equality. And again, it's not a given, it's ongoing. Look, the struggle for freedom and equality is not something linear, and it's an uphill struggle. But this is in order to guarantee a better future to all of us. And equality is not achieved, but it's in progress. And what I've learned through the past years is that no conquest is forever, and we are losing much of what we thought had conquered. International law, as it stands today, is not the problem. It's the application of international law which is failing, because the system is not equal. The system we have today, it's showing its real face. We are finally confronted with something which has always been there, privilege and suprematism. And again, I say the moment you face, the moment you are in a system where some people have no rights but privileges, this is not an equal order anymore, and there is something wrong that needs to be undone. This is the challenge we live today. I do think that there is, though, again, I know that this is such a tragic moment for the Palestinians, and I know that it's difficult to see where we are today, but at the same time, let's take a step back. It's a moment in history. And never before in my 25 years of life, never before, don't be fooled by my fake white hair. Never before I've seen this level of awareness about the Nakba, about Palestine as a settler colonial injustice. So there is something that is coming back. There is something karmic. This is why I say we are suspended between the abyss and hope. And it's really about how much of our capital can we put in this? How much are we ready as individuals to sacrifice of our daily comfort so that yet another people doesn't have to lose everything. This is where we are today.
We're going to take 3 questions/comments, quick ones, and then we're going to wrap up. So I'm going to do a round, and then you can handle them, if you don't mind. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Francesca, and I want to apologize that our Congress canceled your briefing tomorrow in Congress because they are afraid of you and the truth.
I can enjoy breakfast with my best friend in town.
So I wonder if, as a European, you don't find a sliver of hope in the fact that there seems to be greater division in Europe between the staunch supporters of Israel like Germany and other countries like Spain and Ireland, even your own Prime Minister, right-wing Meloni, and Macron from France calling for a ban on arms exports to Israel.
Do you want to answer them
Yes.
one by one?
Yes.
Yeah, you were called out on that one, so go ahead.
Yes, not everything with sparkles is gold. I can tell you about Italy, because in fact they say that they have stopped every arms trade with Israel, but in fact there are investigative reports which say the opposite. So it's a bit wishy-washy. We are in, really, it looks like 1984. Truth is a lie and lie is truth. And it's true. And what I'm experiencing, and I've never felt as real as now, that truth is a revolutionary act. And it comes at a cost. But again, it's worth pursuing. I don't think that, frankly, I think the United States have a huge responsibility in what is going on, and have had a huge responsibility, because the US are the country who have vetoed half of the resolutions that the UN Security Council has ever tabled on Palestine. So we wouldn't be leaving this horrid today hadn't impunity become so crystallized in the context of Israel-Palestine. But no country is innocent. I mean, even the European countries you are mentioning, I'm really impressed with Spain is a particular country, but even a country like Ireland, I'm sorry to say, but Ireland has not passed the occupation bill. It's 6 years that the occupation bill is tabled in the Irish Parliament against the will of the Irish people. It's a bill that prevents any trade with the colonies, any business, any economic connection with the settlements. With the settlements, no, with Israel, with the settlements. While today, forget the settlements. The settlements are part of the unlawful occupation that the State of Israel maintains. So the sanctions, the economic, diplomatic, and political sanctions have to be directed at the states. This is why in this country you get really excited about sanctioning ministers. No question about that, but the sanctions from a state should be directed against the states. And then with due apply to individuals, it's something else. It's called justice. It's called investigation and prosecution. So I do not understand the excitement about individual sanctions against individuals. Organizations, yes, but so it's not linear and it's not a success anywhere when you look at the political environment.
I was going to go to Ireland, but I guess I changed my mind now. But we have, I think, 2 more comments. We're going to have just one here and one there. They had their hands up earlier, so we're going to go to you, and we're going to go to you, and then we're going to finish up.
Well, my question was already sort of spoken by the UN employee who came and asked about sort of the legitimization of human rights. I just thought in my class in law school where we're studying human rights, from a leftist perspective and critiquing human rights as sort of a Western individualist lens for looking at the world, you might be tickled to know that we're pitting you and Samantha Powers against each other for legitimizers versus criticizers of the system, especially in terms of Palestine.
Oh, interesting.
Where do you go to school?
Georgetown. Yeah.
Sounds more like UDC.
Yeah.
Thank you. I asked this question of you before. I want to expand it about the role of. It's okay. It's just Andy. Francesca, about the role of media, and maybe just to expand it about if you can speak to the media coverage, the bias in. I don't want to generalize all of Western media or global media, but let's say American media or however you want to expand it, and also the importance of alternative media, big ones like Al Jazeera. I don't want to name all of them, but the ones that are providing an alternative view, and then also the importance of the ones on the ground. Talk about how many journalists have been killed. I think it's unprecedented in any conflict, which also speaks, it's a testament to the importance of their work. How the journalists are not allowed access on the ground. So how does this sort of tie back to your work, the coverage, that the genocide that's being broadcast live with the help of some and also with the bias in others? Thanks.
Yeah, especially in a fast-changing reality like the one we live in, the work of the media, social media, traditional media, mainstream media, because they still have a reach, is fundamental. Albert Camus used to say that journalists are the historians of the now, the historians of the instant. So they carry such a huge responsibility. And I cannot feel but sorry, but looking at what has been the role of the media, especially Western media, especially, I don't want to generalize, because there's still many journalists, especially not traditional media, who have done an incredible investigative work, including in Israel. And, but 2 things. In situations of genocide, and we discussed this before, but thank you for giving me the opportunity to reemphasize in this audience, but in previous genocides, both in Rwanda and in Bosnia, international tribunals ascertained the responsibility of media in amplifying and replicating some stereotypes or some misinformation that fanned the flames of violence, of ideological hatred, and that enabled genocide. What is characteristic here is that it's been not necessarily, well, it has been Israeli media, in the sense there have been channels, Israeli channels, and also newspapers who have been the house organs of the army and have hosted platforms really dehumanizing the Palestinians, replicating misinformation and lies, like the beheading of the babies. This is something, I was here, I was in another Busboys and Poets 1 year ago with some of you, and we listened to President Biden's speech upon his return from Israel, and he said that he had seen the pictures of decapitated babies, and he was not the only one. So I don't know what these people saw. I'm not saying they lied, but sometimes, this is why we need to listen also to psychiatrists and see what they say, because there is something insane that has circulated across the West. These lies of the beheaded babies, it's incredible because it still comes back. And again, it doesn't take away from the crimes against Israeli civilians that were committed on October 7 and the horror of it. But why do we need to talk about gang rape, mass rape, for which there was no evidence? I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm just saying there is no evidence. And same thing, I mean, even the thing of the decapitated babies was withdrawn by the Israeli army. And still, international media have been the one telling the stories for weeks and months. In my country, it has become the truth. So yes, the role of Western medias will deserve scrutiny on its own. But there is another aspect. This is not new. The dehumanization of the Palestinians, like, frankly, people of color, is so ingrained in our society that we don't even detect it. Now, I think that while we are more alerted, and I'm worried about the weaponization of it, but we are more alerted, and we should be so, and rightly so. We are more alerted about anti-Semitism, because it's disgusting and it's revolting, and again, we should be aware of anti-Semitism. It's unacceptable in Western societies, but so we should be about other forms of racism, discrimination. And if 1/10 of what is said about Muslim people or Muslim countries was said about Jewish people, half of the population would be in jail. See, this is the thing. We cannot use double standards when it comes to protecting individual freedoms. This is the measure of this inequality is evident in our societies. It reflects in the media and in the epistemic violence that is the norm and not the rule. And this is the third element. The way Palestinians are portrayed is generally dehumanizing. This is a repetition of terrorist, as if it was a fact that Israel has targeted terrorists. Do we know? In international law, there is not such a thing. Terror in conflicts becomes a method, the use of terror. But there is no one definition of terrorism in international law. There are other crimes. And the thing is that we look at who has committed, the crime that has been committed instead of criminalizing the individual by assuming that people are terrorists creates a legitimation to kill or to persecute. And this is what, instead of being scrutinized, has been legitimized in Western media and Western society. Will we ever see justice over this? I don't know, but it really depends upon us and the kind of pressure we can exercise to change it. But I can tell you, and I've read Jewish scholars and the way they have documented both the kind of media bias that was used against Jewish people during the years that preceded and even followed the Holocaust, frankly, but also how other groups, other minorities were discriminated against. We have not learned anything. So when we talk about never again, this is a call for shame and introspection from me personally, and may this be the last genocide of human history. This is the only thing I can say.
For those of you that were here earlier, we were able to see a film called Atrocity Inc. by Max Blumenthal, which speaks about the misrepresentation of what happened in October 7th and the narrative that has been carried on and used to justify the genocide against Palestinians. So if you haven't seen it, it's on YouTube. You can just access it. It's a 45-minute film. It's very well done. It really speaks about all that issue. And by the way, anti-Semitism is a European invention, not anywhere else. So thank you for doing that. I want to be able to turn back to Nader to be able to close off the evening.
Well, let me just say, Francesca, we're meeting here tonight at an incredibly dark and desperate moment. And of course, the tragedy of this moment is the prognosis for the next week and the next few months and perhaps the next few years is even darker. So that's why this is such a gut-wrenching moment. But I think everyone in this audience will agree with me that despite this darkness that envelops us, your moral clarity, your passion, and your conviction is helping us to illuminate some of that darkness. So thank you for being with here tonight. Please join me in thanking Francesca.
Thank you. Thanks.
So if you don't want to be, if you don't want to be